Okay, so Arcane's opening. I had completely forgotten it even existed. No, seriously, for whatever reason, whenever I thought back to Arcane's first episode, I remembered it opening with the heist. Everything from the shocking reveal of dead parents to Powder's haunting lullaby, it was completely gone. And that's kind of crazy to me because having just rewatched it, it sort of dawned on me that Arcane's opening is actually pretty amazing. In this one scene, they managed to hammer home the theme of the show, how the main characters relate to that theme, and also the emotional core of the whole season. And the real mastery of it all is how they managed to do it without a single word of spoken dialogue. I even noticed that the true relationship between Vi and Jinx, as in the one cemented in the final episode, it's already being broadcasted to us right here front and center in the first 3 minutes. But hey, don't just take my word for it. Let's watch the scene together, and in a moment you'll also see that Arcane's opening is perfect. The scene opens with an establishing shot of the bridge, and just look at it here. We see it depicted almost as this monolith, a towering monument to the separation between the two cities. We don't know it yet, but it's peppered all over Arcane, as a constant reminder that although these two worlds are connected, the bridge between them is impossibly huge and hopeless to cross. But we also have the smoke here, the embers, the ash. Who's responsible for all this suffering? Enter
Anonymous Statue 101.
And remember to add a bit of that evil imperial red so we can really taste the oppression. Yeah, that's the stuff. Alright, so I'll admit, initially I didn't really get the statue. It's not one of the main characters and we don't hear anything about who it represents, and then, during my second watch, that's when it all clicked. That is exactly the point of this statue. You see, this face represents anonymous authority. You know what Son sees Piltover as? It's part of what makes the whole othering of Piltover possible, making the other side anonymous. And to really sell that point, we get this moment right after the statue. This enforcer walking onto screen, remorselessly executing a saw-eyed rebel. A silhouette that immediately establishes what will become an iconic uniform throughout the show. Our stormtrooper of Arcane, as it were. And the facelessness of the enforcer mirrors that of the statue we just saw, further emphasizing how detached this authority is from the individuals it's supposed to protect and serve. I mean, how could you not sympathize with Son here? Their hatred of Piltover feels pretty justified in this moment because Piltover is marching in, popping rounds into their people without really even knowing who any of them are. And see, this is how Arcane tells us that this story will revolve around the failure and consequences of negligent authority and the division caused by it. It's how Arcane shows us its central theme, and all of that within just 42 seconds. As the enforcer walks towards the camera, a child's doodle cackles its way across the screen. There are scan lines here, an almost glitchy nature to it, and although we haven't encountered Jinx's hallucinations and visions of her past yet, there's an eerie similarity between them and the ones in this opening scene, as if Powder's descent into madness is being foreshadowed here. So, obviously, on our first watch, we don't know this, but on a rewatch, these childlike visuals take on two new meanings. One, their childish appearance alludes to Powder's inability to process or comprehend the trauma of this moment. We get this real-time front-row seat to how the horrors of this battle twists their way into a young Powder's impressionable mind. Two, our insight into this world is currently tinged by Powder's perspective. Ergo, we are on the side of Son. I mean, as the scene continues, we are literally seeing it unfurl from a first-person view centered on Powder. We're not just seeing things from Powder's perspective, we are Powder in this moment. As the scene continues, Vi and Powder walk into frame, and the first face we're introduced to in Arcane is Powder. And you know, I don't think it was entirely accidental that Vi is kind of obscured here. Already now we can tell that there is a bit of a distance between these two sisters. I mean, for all intents and purposes, during this opening shot, Vi is also an anonymous authority. As a character, Jinx embodies anarchy and a fight against authority and power. It was a genius stroke to introduce her as a child here, as children are inherently beholden to authority at any given moment. Between the song she's singing and the covered eyes, it becomes clear that Vi has told her not to look or listen as they walk across the bridge to look for their parents. We're introduced to authority on a much more local scale for Powder, and our first impression of the sisters' relationship is that Vi is Powder's guardian. She's responsible for her and she can't fail her. Powder is too important. This is how they establish Powder as the emotional center of the season. This is her story. As they come to a pause, Powder looks up and we get our first through-the-fingers peek at Vi. Here we see the horror on her face, the unsteady breathing. Once again, we're seeing her from Powder's perspective. She's literally looking up to her, and in this moment, Vi's ability to hold it together is justifiably challenged. And I think her vulnerability here is incredibly important. It communicates to us that Powder's guardian isn't perfect. It tells us that Vi can fail in her role. Oh, and by the way, here's a brilliant little mislead from the showrunners. We see Vi's hand tightening around Powder's as if she's trying to get a literal grip on the situation. It appears as if she remembers her role as Powder's guardian. It's also evocative of a constant of Vi's character in the show. Even when she's scared or horrified, she always pushes forward through it. Only when the camera cuts back to her, we see that in reality she's actually paralyzed and out of breath. She's not about to take a step forward, and she's grasping Powder's hand for comfort, actually. We're reminded in this moment that there's no one there to comfort her. And just like that, they rope us into Vi's arc for this season. Her inability to look out for Powder juxtaposed with this deep need to have someone care for her and her traumas. Alright, next up is Vander, who we're introduced to mid-battle. The first grown-up we see that isn't an anonymous enforcer or deceased, and he is deeply engaged in violence. Let's talk about the choreography here. It's simple, unlike most of ARCANE's depictions of violence. Short and measured strikes, the grapple and toss. We can tell from Vander's posture, weapons and lack of hesitation that he's an experienced fighter. But still, there's a hunched nature to him here. He's tired, of course at the tail end of the conflict, but I don't think they chose to show us Vander in a battle-fatigued state in his first scene on accident. Much of what we explore through Vander in the show is a certain tiredness. A lot of the characters around him allude to cowardice and laziness in his indecision as a leader. He becomes another symbol of failing authority in the show, only this time it's humanized, especially here in the start, where his reluctance to fight and his tired demeanor both feel justified. This man has clearly been fighting all his life. What the show is communicating through both Vander and Vi in this opening is that flawed leaders aren't inherently evil. They have no want for a worse world. In fact, often when they're confronted with it, they try everything in their power to make it better. Vander then displays these clear signs of regret and guilt before guiding their eyes towards these blurred bodies on the screen. The smoke clears to reveal their parents, and notice how Fortiche decided not to include the glitchy or crossed out effects we associate with Jinx during this moment. Partially to communicate this moment is Vi's, but also to hammer home the reality of it all. They found the people they were looking for, and they're no longer with them. Now the first thing that happens here is that we cut to Powder and we get this brilliant little moment that poses a subtle question. So they found their parents. Why isn't Powder crying? Why isn't she reacting? Well, as Powder looks up to Vi during this close-up, we can see the tear streaks down her cheeks. This is ARCANE's visual storytelling at its best. Powder has already been crying. She might not have any more grief in her in this moment. But we're also left to wonder again whether she's too young to even understand what any of it means, or whether it just doesn't hit her in the way it should. And then we get this shot. This gradual breakdown. Look at these minute little details, the twitching of her brow, how they visually pick up her breathing, this brief little sigh as she attempts to regain composure, as she tries to stay strong for Powder, only for it to be followed by the painful inhale as she realizes she's breaking apart. Finally, Vi crumbles to the ground and Powder embraces her. Excluding Caitlyn's later introduction, this is the first and only time that Vi is comforted on screen. This moment works on several levels as it shows us that when the crisis really hits, Powder is the one who takes care of Vi. The shot that immediately follows this one, look at the posture of the characters here. Powder is straight backed as she's hugging her sister. Sure, she slumps with her, but she doesn't slump first. Her strength is being communicated here, but also the truth of the dynamic between these two sisters. Because while Vi is expected to have authority over Powder, at the end of the day, it is Powder who has power over Vi. It is no mystery then that the episodes that follow explore exactly this dynamic. How every decision Vi makes is for or because of Powder, because when it comes to the world of influence, it is Powder and later Jinx who is controlling Vi. Vi takes Powder's side, Vi struggles to get Powder back, and Vi's authority ultimately doesn't matter, even when she's bound to a chair and asked to choose. The decision is made for her. There is no controlling Jinx. And from this very first scene, they've communicated that to us. Powder doesn't cry when she sees her parents are dead, even if you'd expect she would. She's the one who comforts Vi, even though she's the younger sibling. She defies her role, and by defying her role so early on, we know inherently that she is different. All of which alludes to her eventual role as an anarchist. All of these details, themes, and character establishing goodies, and we haven't even started the show yet. No dialogue, just pure visual storytelling that asks us to see rather than hear the story. Arcane guides us to the right conclusions without saying a word. And this first scene on the bridge was the very epitome of that. A purely visual opening to a masterclass in visual storytelling. This video was a bit of a speedy toss together as I wanted it out before Season 2 of Arcane finally hit, recontextualizing my thoughts and feelings on the first season forever. If you like this video, drop me a subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. This has been a /ramble. Bye!